Hey, folks, greetings from the Offensive Security Group here at Security 360, coming at you with a new episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. You've got Mr. Darrius here and myself, Brad. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I don't know. It's an interesting topic, and I'm curious to get your take on it. But should pen testers have the ability to code? All right, and I think there are some kind of broad implications associated with that, but we'll dive into it. Quick admin: if you guys like the show, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. We really appreciate that, and it helps us out. So, should we have to code? Should we have to have that skill set?
So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. I would say in the past, the answer leaned more toward. I feel like in the past, the answer leaned more towards not necessarily because there are other different types of pen testing that necessarily didn't require the need to know how to develop and code, but kind of as technology has changed, I think it's become more relevant and prevalent than ever to where you kind of have to. I think that's kind of the space where we're at now.
I completely agree with that. And so, I think there was this kind of wave that there for a very short period of time, you could get away with being a mediocre pen tester without having coding skills. Now, back when I first started, this I'm talking like early 2000s, then you had to code. Like there just the tools didn't exist to do the work. And so, if you wanted to say, launch a network level attack against something, libraries existed, but tools themselves to actually fuzz like I don't know, some kind of random TCP raw port or something, it didn't exist. So you had to write it yourself. And then I think probably in the like 2010s to, I don't know, 2018 or whatever, there was a time period where you had a tool for almost everything. I don't think we're still there though.
Really? Okay. So I think it's kind of important to kind of think about the relationship between pen testing and coding. I think
I agree.
that's kind of to what you're getting at, to where I mean, I look at it where like even now on an internal pen test, what happens when you have the tool, right? Like you have the PowerShell script that you're going to run and it's going to do the thing to get you the result that you want, but then it doesn't work.
Yeah,
Um, and I think this is where, I've heard other people say before, of like, I think this is where you get the difference between, oh, I'm a pen tester, and oh no, I'm a great pen tester in terms
I
of like,
agree.
okay, your tool didn't work, so what are you going to do next? I think a lot of times it's easy to say, oh, tool didn't work. That must mean, it's not vulnerable. Or, oh, there's something wrong with the client environment, and that's why the tool didn't work. But no, like being able to actually dive into and look at the script or look at the tool and be able to say, okay, wait a second, this failed because on line 89, XYZ, and to be able to modify it, I think that can be the difference between actually, compromising a host or getting the results you want.
Completely agree with that, dude. And there was a test. I don't remember which one it was, but at one point there was a offensive security certification that required you to code like a buffer overflow exploit or required you to modify existing source code and then compile the app and run it, which I thought was really cool. And so I have some specific examples, right? I'll go back to when I was more active in pen testing, and that was um, Go Witness. If you guys have ever heard of that, it's a
Mm,
web screenshot tool. One of the challenges that I faced kind of early on in my career was when you had a larger client on external pen testing, and they had 250 websites. Like, dude, that is a lot. And so, pen testing, especially external pen testing, is a time limited engagement. You do not have enough time if you're on a 5-day pen test to go manually look at every single one of those websites. And so, I wanted a quick way to script out screenshotting those. So I was like, cool, I found Go Witness. There's a couple of other ones out there, but Go Witness didn't work because at the time, and I think they've improved it since, but at the time, if there were resolution issues or the server sent back the wrong response code, it would torpedo the process. So you would get to like website number 10 and it would give you a 500 series error message and Go Witness would stop. And so it would just die. And which really stinks when you're like, okay, I'm going to run this. You come back 3 hours later and it only ran for 5 minutes, and now you're burning time. So I wrote a Python script that used Chrome's headless driver, and had a ton of error handling. Like literally, the script was like it was only 250 lines, but 240 of those were error handling, just so that I could avoid the thing bombing out. And that saved my tail a number of different times. So, again, good pen tester versus somebody who really, really wants to get the job done. Being able to write in Python proficiently and quickly, by the way, not copy paste stack trace stuff. I mean, like actually be able to write from 0 lines of code to a functional script is just life changing in the pen testing world, man.
Agreed. I think also, like, kind of on another note, I think it's kind of interesting because you mentioned buffer overflows. I think as far as the knowledge of what pen test, like, whether it's the language or techniques and things that pen testers need to know, I think it's kind of changed. Like realistically
Yeah.
now, um, you're not going to be writing a buffer overflow, or no, or
It's
you're going to
uncommon.
really see that in the wild now. I think that's also why I think the OSCP, they recently removed that from their exam, because you're not going to see it. But what I do think is kind of interesting is, one of the huge things right now are EDR evasion and being able
Oh
to,
yeah, dude.
deploy your C2s. And so I think now that's where you're starting to get into more, you're having to learn languages like Rust or NIM or something along those lines just to bypass EDR. So that's, I mean, that's a whole other reason that you need to really know how to develop in order to pen test.
Dude, and so you just touched on something that like boom, just blew my mind, right? And it is that um being coding, scripting, let me just say it like this: scripting in Python is a useful skill, but there is a whole different level of proficiency when you can sit down and find a new language, learn it quickly, and start writing, bypasses and exploits and automation with that. That's, so I guess I said that to kind of set the stage of, I think we could go really deep with this and say, yeah, you're down here if you're a pen tester and you don't have the ability to code or the ability to understand code, but then there's a spectrum with regards to how good you are at coding. And I don't just mean, a guy like me who's, I learned on the internet how to code, and I've never really written an enterprise application, but I have written a pile of applications that I needed, that were need based, quickly developed, blah blah blah. Then you look at a guy like you and you look at a guy like Spencer, and you guys have developed fully functional tools and fully functional sites and applications, and I think that just elevates your skill level from a pen tester perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I think it also helps, in terms of dealing with clients, as well as
Oh
being able
yeah.
to say like, hey, let's rewrite this so that you're not introducing SQL injection into your application, things like that
Yep.
nature. It definitely helps. Um, I think also what's kind of interesting to me, just on the coding front, has been, I know Python has kind of been the all right, learn Python because it's useful for everything. And I think what we're starting to also see is, Python is great. I still recommend learning it. But one of the things that I think we see a lot in terms of a lot of Python based tools is the fact that sometimes they can be slow. And
They are
I think
slow.
that's where, we've seen a lot of, you know, Go tools and applications being released that dramatically speed up the process, which is another reason why I think it's important that pen testers learn how to code for that very reason itself. Like, what do you do when, like you said, you're under a time constraint? You got the script, your script is working, it just takes too long. Maybe it makes sense to rewrite it in Go or another language just to kind of
Mhm.
improve efficiency.
Totally agree, man. So the first real application I ever wrote was a network sniffer that used the Berkeley filters to identify headers in HTTP traffic. And I wrote it in a pretty large environment where there was just a ton of traffic, man. We're talking like at the time, we're probably talking 100 meg, like fully utilized pipe. Um, and Python was too slow. So we ended up having to introduce artificial threading in order to make up for the performance issues of Python. And at the time, I didn't have the skill set to pivot to something faster. And we're talking like Python 2.4, man. So it's been a minute. But to your point, limiting yourself to something like Python is probably doing yourself a disservice. Not only because not a lot of stuff is written in Python anymore. It's an older language. Even 3.x It's most people are coming out with stuff that's in Go or coming out with Dockers that have all of the components. And by the way, we as pen testers, hashtag know your tools, have to understand how everything works, and we have to go through those tools. So if you don't know how to read Go,
You're out of
you're out of
luck.
luck. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think we haven't even talked about the fact that like it kind of goes back to some other podcasts we've done of I want to do bug bounties. I want to be do web app pen tests. Well, we said it before. You have to know how to code, at least from a web development
Mhm.
perspective, and that's where it gets really kind of. I feel like that's where it can get really kind of funky because when we talk about web frameworks, they're a dime a dozen. There's a million of them.
Sure.
Like it can be a lot. And so kind of with that in mind, I think it's kind of interesting is to ask you this question of where do you find that balance? So because we're saying, hey, you need to learn how to code.
Mhm.
Um, and there are a lot of different languages, there are a lot of different reasons, whether it's for automation, whether it's for bug bounties, web development. Where do you strike that balance?
Man, I would almost recommend being more of a developer. If we had to break it out into, IT skill set and developer skill set, because that's the only really way I know how to categorize skill sets, without going into the security aspect of things. I would say like 60% or more development capability. And so I care actually less about your ability to configure a Cisco router than I do about your ability to write and understand tooling, because
Interesting.
I just feel like it's more valuable because, by the way, anybody who's intelligent and has experience in our community can go grab a CCNA book off the shelf and be like, oh yeah, I'll it's just running commands, right? It's the same thing. Like, oh, can you go figure out how to run Nmap, dude? Yeah, sure. It's a series of switches. We can figure that out. But going and just arbitrarily figuring out how to write object oriented code in C++, you're not going to figure that out overnight. So I just think it's more valuable in our world to have coding experience and to have that mindset, than maybe to have a background in, networking or systems administration, because those are skills you can learn to some degree, right? You still need experience, but like I still think they're valuable.
No, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of times those guys who have that skill set, they're not pen testers. They're software developers.
Yes.
And for a reason.
So you know what? We had a conversation about this on a previous episode, and it was basically like, generally speaking, human beings are builders or breakers, one or the other. And what makes, I think, our team special and certain pen testers become better than others is that they're able to flip their brain in either direction. Like I can just flip it and I can be a builder and I can spend this week writing code. And then next week I flip over to breaker and now I'm breaking your code. And so having that ability is uncommon in my experience, and it's tremendously valuable in our world.
Agreed for
So
sure.
all right, so the elephant in the room, Darius, what language should people be learning if not Python? Because I'm a Python guy,
Oh
but I
man.
recognize its limitations. I do.
Okay.
But you have more experience in more languages than anybody on our team. So you have to set the standard of what language we should all be using.
Okay. So I feel like
No pressure.
My answer changes every single time I get asked this question. So I'm going to kind of put it in a couple of different places. I think now my opinion is it really depends on what your goal is and what you're trying to achieve. I
Okay.
still say if you are a beginner, you don't know anything, I would still argue Python. It's easy to pick up. And you can pretty much do a little bit of everything with it. You can do
Mhm.
web development with it. You can automate stuff. Like it's a good general purpose tool. I think eventually, though, once you get past and get more to the intermediate level, I
Mhm.
think that's where it really depends. I think from there, um, if you want to do anything bug bounty, web related, JavaScript. And then, like specifically, when you start to get to specific JavaScript frameworks, really popular ones that I see at the moment: React, Next.js. You could throw Angular JS in
I
there,
see it. I
but
see it a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, but I would say those are the more common ones that I would go with as far as JavaScript frameworks. Before you even get into frameworks, at the bare minimum, you should be able to read just basic JavaScript and really be able to write basic JavaScript. There have been times where I've done web app pen tests before, and there's crazy what you can do by exploiting the trust in the client.
Oh yeah.
And so being able to take a function and be able to read it and maybe modify an object can be the difference between you
Huge.
escalating privileges on a web app. So I think that's more of an intermediate thing. Um, I think you have a whole other camp though, where we're talking about EDR evasion and things of that nature. And I think Spencer could speak a lot more to this, but I think that's where you may want to focus on. I know Rust is a really good one right now.
Hmm.
I know NIM is it's still fairly new. It's still bypassing a lot of EDR tools. And so that may be something you want to look at, but I think you have to, before you even get there, you want to have that solid foundational coding knowledge.
Yep.
Um, and I think just side topic as far as people like, oh, what can I do? Man, if you have rewrite a tool in a different language, that's one of the best
It's
ways to
huge.
learn. Is
Yep.
rewrite a tool. So I think you have, as far as EDR evasion and things of that nature. I think those are the tools you might want to look at. Man, there's always the beast, C++.
Oof.
You, yeah, I struggle with that one
Yeah.
personally
Fill up your
still.
coffee pot for that, dude.
Yeah, but there's a lot you can do with it,
There
and
is.
it's you know,
Yeah.
and then I guess finally when it comes to automation, like I said earlier, and I think this is kind of what I've been focused on recently. I think Go. I really think as
Yeah.
far as improving automation, I think rewriting things in Go is definitely the right choice in learning that, and you'll basically kind of really increase how efficient you are with your tools.
Completely agree with everything you just said. And so to summarize, learn them all. And
Yeah,
and not literally like all at once, but as you need them, maybe do start with Python to give you that foundational capability. And then from there, it's like you said, it's going to depend on what you want to do, right? If
yep.
if I'm if I'm writing web apps, man, I'm probably going to be writing them in C sharp, And so I noticed you left off PHP um, because it's a trash language, and
Yeah,
that's why we didn't
it's
talk
still
about
out there though.
Dude,
It's
we
still
still
out
see
there.
web apps.
Yeah.
We still see web apps like live in production, client facing, running PHP code, and I just shake my head when I see it. It makes me sad.
Yeah, it's definitely older. And I mean, is it Laravel? I think that's
Mhm.
I think something that kind of help with the security controls when you're using PHP. But
Bruh, even then,
still,
man, it's
yeah,
it's you're rolling the dice, man, if you're running PHP apps in your environment.
yeah,
Can
I
it be
still think,
done well? Yes, absolutely. Is it easy to do well? No, no.
yeah, and I mean, I'm definitely of the opinion, you have to go with what's popular. I think it's awesome that oh man, Cobalt and you can do database stuff. That's so cool.
Yep,
But when it comes to pen testing, I've yet to come across a situation where I needed to know Cobalt. So I'd say
same.
if you don't know anything, do a little bit of research, go with what's popular. That
Completely
is going to
agree.
get you further ahead more so than not.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, folks, in summary, yes, you need to know how to code if you want to be a pen tester. Now, what language you pick is going to be super dependent on your role, right? Because, again, pen testers used to be kind of a general. It was a career field. Now it's branched out, man. We have web app pen testers. We have specialists who specialize in mobile and internal, and so it's not this. You have to know everything all the time, everywhere. But you do need to pick a language that's appropriate for you to for your task, but also for your targets, right? You need to understand how those things work in addition to being able to write your own stuff. Um, so yeah, anything to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that summarized it beautifully.
Perfect. All right, folks. So if you like this episode, share that with your friends. It's the best way you can help us out. And we will see you next Wednesday.